Welcome, everyone. I'm Clark, and I'm the producer of this channel. I'm from Lehi, Utah. I started Study My Gospel to provide another resource of online gospel learning. I partner with professional gospel instructors for our various series, including Come Follow Me, Gospel Topics, and more to come. If you like the content, please subscribe. Enjoy the video.
Hi, my name's Casey Griffiths, and I teach religion. I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about some lesser known accounts of the first vision. These accounts are written in Joseph Smith's lifetime and are very, very important, but are a little bit different than the accounts that you're used to hearing about. So, just to review, there are four accounts written by Joseph Smith of the first vision by himself in his own lifetime. They're written in 1832, in 1835, in 1838, and in 1842. At the same time, there are five accounts written by Joseph Smith's contemporaries who heard the story firsthand from him or likely did. There's people like Orson Pratt and Orson Hyde, who were apostles and close friends of the prophet, that we assume heard the story firsthand from him. And then there's other people that say they spoke with him directly and write down the story. So you're familiar with these four. These were mentioned by President Ballard in the April 2020 General Conference. I want to talk about some of the lesser known accounts of the first vision and how these can help us understand some of the interesting details that come from it. So let's start first with Orson Pratt. Orson Pratt is a member of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles that's called to serve a mission, along with the rest of the 12, to the British Isles. While Orson is in the British Isles, he's dispatched north to serve in Scotland, and while he's in Edinburgh, Scotland, he publishes a tract entitled An Interesting Account of Several Remarkable Visions. This becomes kind of a standard missionary tract used by church leaders during the 1840s, 50s, and beyond, and in it, he writes an account of the first vision, using what we assume is firsthand knowledge from Joseph Smith, and also an account of the coming forth of the Book of Mormon, several key events early on in the Restoration. Now, he records a few details here that aren't in other accounts of the first vision. For instance, he mentions that the pillar of light or the pillar of fire, Joseph uses both to describe it. He says he expected to have seen the leaves and the boughs of the tree consumed as soon as the light came in contact with them. But perceiving that it did not produce that effect, he was encouraged with the hopes of being able to endure its presence. So this makes it sound like the pillar was something physical, that Joseph expected to see the grove around him burst into flames when it came into contact with the leaves, but it didn't. That's an interesting detail, that it's a physical phenomenon and not just something that Joseph Smith is imagining or seeing. Second account comes from another one of the apostles, Orson Hyde. You'll remember Orson Hyde is the apostle that makes the 7,000-mile journey to Jerusalem to dedicate the Holy Land. On his way back, he stops in Germany and serves there for a time. And while he's living in Frankfurt, he publishes a tract that originally is entitled Einruf aus der Wüste. The full title of it, translated into English, is A Cry Out of the Wilderness, A Voice from the Bowels of the Earth, a short summary of the origin and teaching of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in America, known by many under the name Mormons. Not a short title here. The tract is originally published in German, and if you know how to read or speak German, you might want to read it that way. But translated into English, it does include some other interesting details. For instance, Orson Hyde records, his mind was filled with doubts and brought to mind all manner of inappropriate images to prevent him from obtaining the object of his endeavors. This is a reference to the attack of Satan on Joseph Smith before he sees God the Father and Jesus Christ. And it's just kind of a recounting of the adversary's methods that he uses to try and stop Joseph from receiving genuine revelation, that he puts images into his mind or brings to mind things that would cause him to lose the spirit and lose his connection to God. The next one actually comes from someone who says they heard Joseph tell the story firsthand. This is Levi Richards. Levi Richards is a convert to the church in the 1830s who later serves a mission the same time Orson Pratt does. While he's in Britain, he converts several people to the gospel. Then when he gets back to Nauvoo, just a few weeks later, he records Joseph Smith telling him the story of the first vision. And he writes this: he went into the grove and inquired of the Lord which of all the sects were right. He received an answer that none of them were right, that they were all wrong, and that the everlasting covenant was broken. Now, that phrase, the everlasting covenant, is really, really interesting because at this time in 1843, Joseph Smith is restoring the temple ordinances. He's introducing them gradually to a small group of people in Nauvoo. And as he's introducing them, his mind is on the everlasting covenant and what it means. And so he mentions here that the Father and the Son, from their very first appearance, were worried about the everlasting covenant, that the goal was to restore the everlasting covenant and bring it back into full effect so that it could bless the children of men. The next account of the first vision comes from someone who's not even a church member. David Nye White was a reporter from the Pittsburgh Weekly Gazette that interviewed Joseph Smith and then wrote the first vision from the conversation. So it's possible that in this particular account, White may have taken some liberties with the story, although it does seem to match closely the other accounts of the first vision that we have. It starts with Joseph Smith telling him, "God does reveal himself to me. I know it. He revealed himself to me when I was about 14 years old, a mere boy. I will tell you about it." Then Nye writes this brief account where he basically goes through all the details, but adds through a couple interesting things. For instance, he writes that Joseph said, "I immediately went out into the woods where my father had a clearing and went to the stump where I had stuck my axe when I had quit work. I kneeled down and prayed, saying, 'O Lord, what church shall I join?' Directly I saw a light, and then a glorious personage in the light, and then another personage, and the first personage said to the second, 'Behold, my beloved son, hear him.' I then addressed the second person, saying, 'O Lord, what church shall I join?' He replied, 'Don't join any of them. They are all corrupt.' The vision then vanished, and when I came to myself, I was sprawling on my back, and it was some time before my strength returned." So he adds in these little details that add an air of authenticity to the story. Joseph's family had just purchased their farm a few years previous and were in the process of clearing the forest off so that they could have as much farmland as possible. Joseph apparently went to a place where he had been working and where he had left his axe previously, and that's where the prayer happened. That's where the sacred grove would be located. The last account is only shared a few weeks before Joseph Smith passes away. It's shared with a little convert named Alexander Niebuhr, who is born in Germany, immigrates to Britain, and then joins the gospel there. Niebuhr is an interesting character in his own right. He's a dentist, a teacher, he manufactures matches, and he immigrates to Nauvoo in 1841. And he's the last person who writes down the prophet sharing an account of the first vision prior to his martyrdom on June 27th, 1844. And this has all kinds of interesting details that you don't see in other accounts of the first vision. For instance, Niebuhr records Joseph saying, "I saw fire towards heaven. It came nearer and nearer. I saw a personage in the fire, light complexion, blue eyes, a piece of white cloth drawn over his shoulders, his right arm bare. After a while, another person came to the side of first Mr. Smith and then asked, 'Must I join the Methodist Church?' 'No, they're not my people. They've all gone astray. There is none that doeth good, no, not one. But this is my beloved son. Hearken ye him. The fire drew nigher, rested upon the tree, and enveloped him." All kinds of fascinating details here, including the idea of the clothing that the father and son are wearing and what that may symbolize or what that mean. He also specifies that Joseph Smith is asking about the Methodist Church, which may or may not be true. It's possible that Joseph adds that detail in or that Niebuhr writes it down on his own. But each one of these just kind of add to our mosaic that we have of what actually happens in the Sacred Grove in 1820. The four accounts of Joseph Smith, especially the 1838 account, are where we're going to spend most of our time and effort in explaining and understanding the doctrine. But these accounts also add to our understanding and help us know that Joseph enthusiastically shared the story with several people, especially after he writes the official account in 1838. He's anxious for the story to be known out there because it's such a great model for us to find our own answers, to go to God and ask in prayer and receive liberally from God the blessings that we seek. Thanks very much for listening. I'll be back with more church history and church history insights. Until then, be safe, and I'll see you soon.